Hello Jason, it's Monday, January 13th, and today I want to talk to you about yoga. Specifically, I want to share with you some of the knowledge I have about yoga that I gained through university. Now, in university, I took a few courses on Eastern traditions, and that's where I get all this information from. But as I'm sharing this information with you, I want you to keep one thing in mind. What I'm talking about isn't yoga the way we think about it today. Rather, I'm going to try to explain the history and circumstances surrounding yoga that allowed it to become what we think of today. How it started and how it changed over time. And yoga has had a lot of time to change. By all accounts, the first evidence we have of something resembling yoga comes from the Harappa culture in what we now consider Pakistan, and dates back more than 4,000 years. This evidence comes in the form of signets and seals that depict several figures sitting in what we consider a yoga pose. From what we can tell, these figures had some specific spiritual significance. The reason we think this is because the figures are surrounded by specific animals which later become associated with Hindu gods. So we can see early on that yoga was more than just a physical activity to the society that created it. In fact, until extremely recently, yoga was never considered just a physical activity. If anything, it was meant to be the exact opposite, disassociating the practitioner with his or her own body. We see this in the pre-Hindu culture of the Indian subcontinent. In many ancient texts, yoga is described as the act of depriving the body through starvation, and then contorting it so that the consciousness can escape and transcend into a higher realm of existence. Indeed, this practice is still seen today in many Hindu and Buddhist traditions. So as you move towards your goal of becoming a yoga master, think back to the tradition that spawned your goal in the first place. And remember that before it became a Western industry, it was a spiritual practice that was meant to help transcend physical reality. Moving on, I have to share some bad news with you. I failed my own challenge. As you know, last Thursday, I suggested that we take advantage of the nice weather and each try to run 10 miles during the 3-day gap between our videos. Long story short, I didn't quite make it to 10 miles. What I did manage to achieve this weekend, though, was to find a circuit that's approximately 3 miles long that I intend to use when the weather gets nicer. And I did complete 2 rounds of that circuit. So out of the proposed 10 miles, I managed to get 6 in. Now I know you're probably wondering, hey Steve, if you weren't running, what were you doing all weekend? And by way of answering, let me say this. On Thursday night, I finished Bossy Pants by Tina Fey. Then on Friday, I started Carrie by Stephen King, which I finished last night. And then this morning, I started Fight Club by Chuck Palahniuk, which I'm a quarter of the way through. So that's 2 more books done on my reading challenge and a nice chunk done on a third. So I'm really quickly just going to review the 2 books that I finished. Firstly, Bossy Pants by Tina Fey was an interesting read to say the least. I got the distinct impression while reading that she never really intended her book to have a male audience. In fact, if I had to describe the tone of the book, it's almost like a mundane feminism. It may just be that Tina Fey comes from a comedic background, but the bitterness in this book comes across as sarcasm. Don't really know whether or not that helps the feminist cause. The overall message I get from this book is that if someone tells you you can't do something, then stop doing it to try to please them. Just do it for yourself. And if nothing else, I guess that's a decent message. In terms of entertainment, I found almost every page of this book to have something worth reading. Like I said, Tina Fey comes from a comedy background, and that definitely shows in the writing. However, from a literary perspective, it's hard to gauge biographies, especially when they're not meant to be taken seriously. So I would definitely say that this comes across as more of a fun read than an educational one. In terms of literary value, I would give it a 2 out of 5. And for entertainment, I would give it a 4 out of 5. And then I moved on to Carrie by Stephen King. To build a small bit of perspective, it's important to note that Carrie was Stephen King's first novel. Prior to publishing the book, he was known primarily for short stories and magazines, and I feel like that definitely came through in the writing. It seemed more like a long short story than a short novel. Having said that, it was still a really good long short story. The basic premise is that an outcast teen at high school realizes she has telekinetic abilities and has to deal with the responsibility of judging and passing judgment on the people around her. In terms of entertainment, it's very difficult to beat Stephen King. He's one of the few modern-day authors that really knows how to shape a good story. And his first novel is no exception. And from a literary perspective, it's interesting to note that Stephen King plays around with form a lot more than you would expect from a modern-day popular author. The book definitely has some slow passages, and the form that Stephen King uses I feel gives away too much from the beginning, but it's still an entertaining story. From a literary perspective, I'm going to give the book a 3 out of 5. And from an entertainment perspective, I'm going to give it a 4 out of 5. Still on the topic of reading, I've started to set up my literary review side channel. I don't have anything up yet, but I hope to have it up and running by the end of the week. I also really like the idea of you and I reading A Tale of Two Cities at the same time. In fact, I like it so much that I think we should extend it to the viewers as well. I think we should set the date to July, and anyone who wants to read along with us should pick up a copy of the book by then. That way we can start a sort of rad bromance book club. And that brings me to the next thing I want to talk about, viewer participation. Now, so far in the project, it's mostly been you and me going back and forth discussing our challenges. But I know that while we were conceiving of the project, we didn't want to keep it just between you and I. We wanted the viewers to be as much a part of it as we were. And so to this end, I want to run a sort of test. Right now, I'm having trouble coming up with an idea of what to paint for my January painting. So I want the viewers' help. Either on this video or on our Facebook fan page, I want you to leave a comment suggesting things that I should paint. On Friday, I'll take all the ones that I think I might be able to do, put them in a hat, and pick one out. Beyond that, though, I think we should be actively seeking more viewer-generated challenges. I mean, if we just do the challenges that we come up with, then we're never really going to get out of our own comfort zones. Along with suggestions for my painting, I encourage anyone watching to leave a comment on any of our videos or on our Facebook fan page, suggesting challenges that we can do on a week-by-week basis. In fact, Jason, I don't know if you've already seen this, but your sister has provided you with a challenge. She wants you to make risotto as one of the dishes you learn to cook. So like I said, I highly encourage anyone to leave us a comment suggesting things that we can do as week-by-week challenges. Now to chess. Interesting move there, Jason, though I'm not quite sure what you're planning to accomplish with it. But I guess at present that's not really my concern, because I know what I'm going to accomplish with my move. Pawn from g5 to f5.